Welcome and happy Wednesday. I'm Lisa Wardlaw. I'll be moderating a panel today with these esteemed panelists on From Pain Point to Powerhouse, a blueprint for nothing other than our favorite topic right now, which is AI, innovation in Canadian insurance. And joining us today, before we get into details, we have Dave Keirstead, Chief Data and Analytics Officer, Manulife Canada, James Warburton, Chief Information Officer, Gore Mutual Insurance, Fahad Shaikh, VP Data Science, Engineering and R&D, Aviva Canada, and Noelle, Roque, Director, Artificial Intelligence Strategy and Initiatives from Manulife. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the webinar. And to all of our guests, before we do this overview and kick off and get down into the details, I want to remind everyone, first of all, thank you for joining us. Secondly, we have opened the Q&A function. We will have time at the end of our session today where our panelists will be taking your questions. So make sure you feel comfortable asking questions, putting questions in there so that we can group them and make sure the panelists answer your questions live today. With this, I'd like to turn it over to the objective and overview of the session. There's a lot going on right now. Canadian insurers are grappling with many pieces of a complex puzzle. AI has presented us a unique opportunity to maybe catapult ourselves ahead, but with that comes a lot of challenges, strategy, implementation considerations, and thoughts. So I want to turn it over to each of our panelists to introduce themselves and maybe kick off with just a short reflection on what creating a powerhouse of blueprint for AI in the Canadian insurance marketplace means to them. And Dave, I'm going to turn it to you first. Welcome to the webinar.
Oh, thanks so much, Lisa. And thanks everyone for joining us today. So I'm Dave Keirstead. Spent my entire career getting value out of data. And for the last 17 in the insurance industry, last 2.5 at Manulife in my role as Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Manulife Canada. AI has always been a passion of mine, and spent a huge chunk of my career, leading data science teams, and a long time ago used to train ML models myself, and kind of miss those days. But insurcos all of us are undergoing huge transformations in terms of digital transformation, modernizing how we work. And AI, has been at the core of that transformation for several years. With GenAI, we're seeing that even explode further into new kind of opportunity spaces and unlocking forms of data that traditionally we struggled with natural language, and creating new content. I think one of the things I'm most excited about is the future democratization of this capability and moving it beyond just the hands of data scientists into the hands of the masses.
Awesome. I love that. I'm so excited to see this continue as well. So next up, Noelle, if you wouldn't mind giving your reflection and a brief intro.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lisa. So just a little bit about me. I am an engineer by training. I spent most of my career in consulting actually as a business strategist. So specifically, I'm very excited and have always been passionate about operating model transformation through process reengineering, technology, digital analytics, data. So in my current role in Manulife, I lead our global AI strategy. I work closely with our global chief analytics officer and our segment AI leaders to scale the impact of advanced analytics and AI across our businesses. So what that looks like from a day-to-day perspective is I'm always thinking about what are the things we need to have in place and need to do well and to do right to make sure that we have that differentiated use of AI across our value chain. How do we think about productization, innovation, and to Dave's point, democratization? That's actually, for me, when I reflect on the topics we're going to talk about today, I am most excited about how do we need to operate differently to unlock those new opportunities that we are seeing as creating significant value, more so than traditional AI. And to the point on democratization, we've always been on transformation journeys through different technologies and capabilities that have been introduced. But I think this is one where I feel like we're closer to getting it real and breathing life to it than in our previous journeys.
Yeah, I love that, Noelle. We talk a lot about like the inflection point that AI is bringing, which we'll talk about more with you all as we go through this, versus just automating or just digitalization. So I think that this is a fascinating topic to be covering. So James, welcome to the webinar. We'd love a quick overview of your reflection on this and your background.
Sure, thank you. I'm James Warburton. I'm the CIO at Gore Mutual. I've been in this role for a couple of years. Been in technology and technology consulting, I suppose, my whole career, about 24 or so. And then the last little while, since being in Canada, been specifically working in insurance. And what really gets me going, I suppose, is that intersection of technology and business. And really, how can we bring the technology capabilities into the business? How can we get the benefit out of that? That's really been my focus, I suppose, my entire career. And that's what is exciting about AI, and specifically as the both panels talked about GenAI. The difference here is really bring the capabilities to all employees, regardless of your experience with data analytics, engineering, data science. We're able to bring that capability right to the front lines and get huge value out of it. And exciting as well. It's possible to apply this.
So James, sorry to interrupt you, just quickly. We're all having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. I don't know if the audio is going on your side. There's several people saying we can't hear James. And I thought it was just me. So I'm glad some other people commented. Could you just do a quick hello for us and just see?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay?
That's much better. And I apologize. It cut off most of what you're saying. If you don't mind, just a quick recap so that the audience can hear it.
It was absolutely spectacular what I said.
It was an Academy Award, right?
It was, yeah, absolutely. So I'll try again, but I'm going to have to remember what I said because it was so good. I'll go back to the beginning. 24 years or so in tech and consulting, 13 years, the last little while in insurance. And I love the intersection of business and technology. And that's what for me is so exciting about GenAI, that it's able to bring, and Dave and Noelle talked about it, but we can bring that capability to every employee, regardless of experience with data science, engineering, or other skill sets. So it's also great that it's got so much applicability across process and operations within insurance. So I think there's just so much for us to do. We're going to look back in 5-10 years and go, this was an internet moment, in my opinion. This was a smartphone moment. I don't think this is going to interact. This is real, and it is here to stay. Where it's going, that's for us all to hypothesize and experience and enjoy the next few years, I think.
Love it. So first of all, we can hear you a lot better.
Okay,
thank you.
great.
Thank you. So now I'm going to move on to Fahad. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'd love to hear your reflection. And of course, your background. You all have like this amazing community right there in Canada, where it seems like a lot of you all have been in data science and AI together. So welcome to the webinar, Fahad.
Great. Thank you. Really happy to be here. And thanks everybody for joining. So I've been doing data science specifically in the P&C space for close to 10 years now, previously building analytical models and products and seeing them integrated through into processes within the P&C insurance space. At Aviva, I lead our data science and machine learning engineering teams. And we're really looking at applying data science at an enterprise scale. So going after each large domains that exist within Aviva and looking at applying data science, one use case after another. So when we think of GenAI, partially it is, for us data science practitioners, it is an evolution of what we've already been doing, but at the same time, it also feels very much new. And definitely it is a big shift and big change where it's gonna force us to look at ways to work differently, right? So, and by that, what I mean is, how the data science teams work closely with technology teams. That's going to be a little bit different, and similarly with business teams counterparts as well. So these are really, really exciting times for sure.
Yeah, I love it. And what better group of people to take these exciting times and to like orchestrate for our audience today, how to start thinking of building this blueprint. before we go into building the blueprint, let's step back just a moment, because I've been in several discussions recently where we're saying this word like, well, traditional AI versus generative AI, et cetera. Can you all, we're now calling it traditional. I really like that. It's very, it's like high German. But what we're all talking about, of course, is the emergence of generative AI. And I always feel it's great to start with how does generative AI differ from more traditional machine learning or other AI techniques? And specifically, how you all are thinking in your organizations about leveraging generative AI. And I'm going to start with James, so we can get the sound check out of the way to see what you think about this, James. And then we're going to rotate through.
Let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm very, very close to my microphone.
You're close to your microphones. Let's go.
All right. So look, I mentioned it in the intro. I think I think most people on this call will likely know the technical difference and the generative nature of it, the creation nature. So I'll focus on more that it's about being able to bring that capability directly into the hands of individuals. No longer is it a data science team creating a model that then is accessed through a pricing algorithm. You're actually bringing that capability right to the front.
Right.
And then even if you just think about one of the capabilities, imagine that we're able to then summarize these huge amounts of unstructured data that we've never been able to do before. And that's one of the key differences. I think that we're able to give new capabilities to augment individuals in the front line. So now I won't focus on the technical capabilities, but in terms of how it's going to manifest itself, that's really good.
Yeah. Okay. So Noelle, I'm going to kind of pick on you next, because you're in the middle of my screen. And you mentioned something really interesting in your opening, which is, you've been going through a lot of transformation and strategy. And I kind of think generative AI is a strategist's dream, in the sense of, you can't just think in the immediate horizon. You've got to think beyond. And for strategy people, we talk Horizon 2 and Horizon 3. And for those of you who don't live and love our world, that means out years. So we think about out years and we think of bringing it back. Noelle, how are you thinking of generative AI and that difference between more traditional AI practices? And how are you maybe invoking some of that generative AI into your strategic considerations and activation?
Yeah, for sure. I love this question, because when I explore even as a consultant, like part of what you do is, let's explore the art of the possible. Like, let's think about how to do things differently. Let's anchor on value. And I feel like with traditional AI, we've done that really well in terms of tackling individual use cases. How do we optimize parts of our value chain, specific niches of our value chain? Basically, how do we do the work that we currently do in the way that we know how to do it, just better with technology, analytics, AI, and what have you. With GenAI, now it's opened up a completely different world. It's no longer just about how do I do the way I do this work today better. It's actually, how do I reimagine not just this part of the process or my workflow or my value chain, but how do I completely reimagine that? So in terms of taking a step back, using the words of are we just optimizing the way we're doing something today? Could we maybe take a differentiated approach to solving problems we've never been able to solve for before, or extend that a little bit more? Or when you look ahead to something more disruptive around business model innovation, complete operating model transformation, I am incredibly excited about that, because I am seeing, and we are seeing in Manulife, that is something that is close to real in terms of what we can pursue for opportunities. I am forgetting the second part of the question, so if you could please repeat it, that would be great.
Yeah, no worries. I think the second part is there anything that you're activating, which I think you're talking about as well, with respect to generative AI, especially, I'll kind of add a little asterisk on this, Noelle, that I didn't ask you originally. I mean, I grew up for 11 years in life and health in North America. And I think life has lagged a little bit in terms of our P&C colleagues, in terms of maybe some of the just rush to the finish line with some insurtechs and tech. But this is an interesting point for life specifically and how we leverage generative AI given the complexities of life insurance. Are you all like deploying any specific use cases today, or how are you thinking about framing that up?
So I'll answer the question a little bit differently. When we think about what are the opportunities to pursue within our organization? My macro lens is, there's always the traditional anchoring on what will create efficiencies and what will create growth from a use case standpoint. And then there are opportunities that really acknowledge that this is a broader and more impactful transformation journey. So what are the things that are opportunities that we need to pursue to enable everyone in Manulife to participate in the transformation journey? So to James's point about getting this into the hands of everyone outside of data science teams, etc. We've actually deployed our internal version of ChatGPT so everyone can start using GenAI in their day-to-day and upskill on prompting.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think that the interesting flavor was everyone had insert insurance name .gpt. And so we should do a little, how many .gpts are there in insurance? But I love that. Dave, how are you thinking about this? And clearly, like, how much generative AI are we seeing? Is it hype, or are we actually deploying it? Over to you, Dave.
We're actually deploying it, and we didn't call ours Sun GPT. We called ours Sunlife Asks when we launched it in
There we go. You guys got creative.
Yeah, we got our marketers involved. But when I think about so there's across the globe at Sun, there's a ton of use cases that are at various stages, whether they be experimentation or things that we've rolled out into, like, we'll call it pilot production, or something like co-pilot tools that we've rolled out to thousands of developers across the globe, that kind of thing. So when we think about Gen AI, I always think about the what and then the how, because it is very different in both cases. We're really excited about both the incremental improvement that we can make, like 1 teaspoon at a time, through the democratization of the capability. Think how powerful Microsoft Excel was, right? Or the internet, like how that has changed work. This, we believe tools like Sunlife Asks are going to make, we're seeing, a difference in just micro tasks that knowledge workers are taking on a day-to-day. We also believe, and we're investing in areas around some of the fundamental levers that we've got across our value chain, right? Areas that are no shocker for AI investment traditionally. Things like claims management, underwriting, those kind of things, those big chunky levers, those are things that we know we're going to be able to drive significant incremental improvement in productivity and efficiency, and then also are kind of ripe for the kind of change that Noelle had talked about. On the how, I was going
to say, I was going to prompt you on the how. Go ahead.
Yeah. So on the how, Gen AI is different. Like, when we think about how we would communicate the effectiveness of a model to an underwriting team or a claims management team, that as data scientists, we love ourselves a confusion matrix, like what's the actual versus predicted look like. And we're able to kind of traditionally have been able to stress test things kind of behind the curtain a little bit, in terms of looking at validation and accuracy and that kind of thing. As we've been rolling out, tools like we've got, a product chatbot that we've rolled out in one of our businesses. We're exposing, we're getting our user community to provide feedback and, help validate. And that's a bit messier process than, what we've done traditionally. And so, one of the things that we've had to do is bring people along the journey. Change management is always a huge part of any piece of work, the last mile being the only mile that matters. But in this we're finding that kind of effort that we have to put into communication and education around what's going on behind the scenes is even more important than our traditional AI models.
Yeah, for sure. Connects that democratization aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fahad. So how are you, like, okay, I assume the definition agrees, but can you kind of make sure that we all understand and generative AI? Maybe I'll ask you a subtle additional question to that. What's one really good thing that people can think of with Gen AI? Because we talk about these words like generative AI and, AI that creates, but like maybe you give somebody, the audience an example. And then again, how are you thinking about that in Aviva? What are you all thinking about in terms of application of generative AI, and where are you in that journey right now?
Yeah, so, in terms of traditional AI, I mean, the goal always was how can we improve operational efficiency across all processes that we have, as well as offer the best customer service to our customers. So, offer great customer experiences. The goal for generative AI remains the same, right? It's just that the universe of what we can do with this technology has just expanded. With traditional or narrow AI, the tasks that it can perform are very, very specific and only can do the tasks that it's trained for. With generative AI, it's more creation and general creation. There's a lot more creative flexibility that exists. So that I think is so in terms of what use cases can be solved. So what we're doing is offering teams almost like a blueprint for what does it mean to do a generative AI use cases. What kind of use cases make the most sense for generative AI, right? So, for example, if throughput and speed is very important, then that's a good use case for generative AI. And similarly, if, for example, the nature of the data that we are using, that we want to draw insights from, it is more unstructured in nature in terms of the documents processing. That's a very strong use case for generative AI. I mean, and also to the point that Noelle made earlier, across customer service, underwriting, and claim summarization, we definitely think that we expect that almost 50% of these very roles will actually change in the next 5 years. And that's both in terms of automation of tasks. So what tasks can we automate for people, and what can we automate away, but as well as augmentation. So in terms of customer service and claims handling, for example, which may be more about automation of tasks. In the case of underwriting, it may be more about augmentation, right? So how can we enhance give augmentation to the people doing the underwriting work? So that's kind of how we are looking at it at Aviva.
Yeah, super robust. And I think all these examples that you are saying is we now have this additional robust tool and capability framework that we need to think more holistically about in our organization. So before we move on to foundation, which I want to get into data because it's always the foundation, I want to do a quick round robin. I'm going to start with you, Dave. What's the one thing, so quick round robin, what's the one thing most significantly that your organization has had to implement, change, transform, whatever, to accommodate generative AI? We'll start with you, Dave.
Sure thing. I think first off, we set out a community of practice, so communicate. We're working globally against this. Training, really important. And then making sure that we're dealing with every initiative is starting from the end and working our way back. So thinking about like what's the impact and change management from the get-go.
Noelle?
Yeah, similar to Dave, leaning into that mindset of what's the value, what's the job to be done here that we need to solve for, versus attacking with, hey, Gen AI, how do I stick it into this process? Like really taking a step back, what's the job to be done and what's the value we're trying to get out of it, right? So embodying that and modeling that. Not necessarily a change we implemented, but I think we've all talked about newer ways of working with design thinking, customer centricity, and agile. This has just really solidified how we actually really truly do that and live and breathe that in our day to day. So that's been really fantastic. I was in a call yesterday where we were talking about one of the use cases that we deployed into production, and it was so great to hear from our business leader. One of the changes she felt that we really did really well was building products for the people by the people. So to the point around, testing from our target users, we've actually brought them into the squads and really helping us design these products and solutions, because we're all trying to navigate this space. We're all trying to figure out where's the value. So let's do it together.
I love that. James, got full headset. Let's see.
Yeah, let's see. How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
All right, there we go. Nice. Old school. So we similar to Dave and Noelle, we actually, and maybe I'll bring a specific of the change we made. We actually brought in a number of our frontline teams to really think about what are the capabilities that this brings. And we did a design thinking project over 10 weeks to say, what are the major areas that this new capability can be used? So to answer the question, it's change management. It's about really awareness and training and understanding. And it isn't, I went into this going, oh, well, it's just going to be, another Excel tool or Word, and you'll just learn how to use it, and not true at all, right? So I think one of the big learnings is this is quite a significant change and to adopt, and in terms of workflow and day to day. So that would be one of the large things. The other, just quite data or detail specific, I suppose, is around our data loss prevention. We actually had to rethink a little bit of our data policy and our security policy around the internal use, just even thinking about document classification. So it's a very, many layers to this, and we went down as far as having to rethink our data loss prevention.
Yes, very important, Fahad.
Yeah, in terms of change, I mean, everybody, I think, covered most of the things, but the one aspect I meant stress on is risk management. I think is quite important and has to be looked at maybe a little bit differently, right? As opposed to, as was mentioned earlier, it's very hard to evaluate a large language model, the performance it's going to do. So I think the risk management aspect and the governance of generative AI has to be brought at the forefront, right? And we need robust governance frameworks in place before we look at rolling these tools out to the organization, whether it's inward facing and outward facing. And I think from a change perspective, as we think about new roles getting invented, or like changing the way things will happen in the workforce, right? I think it's just we're gonna have to think about how workforce management is going to change, right? So we're gonna have to project the impact that generative AI is going to have the workforce and plan accordingly. So I think, and then training, right, is also an important one, right? You want to set the organization up for success, which means providing the right training to the organization, whether it's the power users who are developing the technology, but then also the users of the technology, right? So both sides of the spectrum have to be managed for a robust training across the organization.
Yeah. And I keep hearing holistic, right? None of this is fragmented. None of this is, we saw finally, right? Digital was so I understand we planned and we did all the things and we did change management, but we didn't do it the way we have to do it now. And so I think that it's really important that what you all are saying in terms of the blueprint is it's holistic, it's not siloed. You have to democratize it, and you have to think beyond the immediate variable you're trying to solve for, because it's these bigger things that as it permeates and grows. And one of my favorite friends who used to run data and analytics for Swiss Re used to say you have to start with scale in mind and then work backwards, which is what you all are saying here. So I love that. Let's move on to my favorite, which is the foundation. So AI is awesome. It's here. It's applicable. We're applying it. You all gave all these amazing examples, but you have to have a data infrastructure upon which to apply AI, right? It's a consuming in nature, right? And it has to, and I'm having worked at a company where data reported to me and data science had a dotted line to me. There was always this, back in those traditional AI days, this debate between, do you have the data we need? Do you have the machine learning accuracy we need? And we would always kind of the rubber would meet the road in between the two. What are you all thinking in terms of maturity of your data foundation? And if not, what are you doing? Because clearly in your roles, you're not waiting for the data to get mature. It's like, it's here now. We've got to do something with it. And maybe, Fahad, I'll start with you because I don't think I've started with you yet. So I'm going to go back to you on this one as a lead off.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, the foundations have to be very, very strong, and that's something that you know, at Aviva we're putting a heavy emphasis on, right? So even if you think about the actual all the layers that are involved in making generative AI happen, right? There's the cloud layers, there's the data layer before even the modeling layer and the application layer, right? So I think we've been doing cloud. Everybody's been doing cloud for many years. In terms of data, you know, coming up with a robust data strategy, I think is even more paramount than it was before, right? So, you know, you cannot do generative AI without having a robust data strategy in place. And so that's key, right? So that strategy needs to have buy-in all the way from the top, and it has to be you know, permeate through the organization. So, you know, in terms of the technology, so again, when you think about a data strategy, it has to involve all of what business objects are we trying to address through the strategy. And I like to say it's almost 50-50 between technology as well as the problems that you're trying to solve. And, you know, we've seen lots of modern data platforms come into the foray now with, you know, tools like Snowflake and Databricks, and all of these companies are making a ton of innovation in the generative AI space. But also, like, we're also seeing this technology also just has the ability to make sense of the data that is on premise, for example, right? So yeah, but you know, having a robust data strategy is I think the key of what is it that you're trying to drive. I think that it starts from there, and then, you know, the architecture and the business strategy has to work hand in hand.
Yeah. Noelle, anything to like layer onto that from your lens?
Yeah, I echo everything Fahad said on, you know, the importance of building on the great investments we've all made in the cloud. I think, like, from my perspective in Manulife, at this point, we're really reaping the benefits of the investments we've made in our data strategy, modernizing our data platform and our analytics platform. Like, what we're really focused on today is how do we continue to mature these capabilities now, specifically with GenAI in mind. We're also really focusing on how do we take an equally strategic approach to unstructured data, and what's the governance and quality program we need to put around that, right? Because I think in early experimentation, we're seeing, you know, the results of our early solutions are really surfacing where we need to pay attention in terms of improving the quality of our unstructured data, like knowledge bases, process manuals, product manuals. The other thing that we're thinking about as well in terms of our foundations is, you know, we have a global chief data scientist who's looking at what's that next level type of GenAI or just AI techniques that we should be bringing in-house in anticipation of how we might solve business problems differently over the next 3 to 5 years. So through that team, you know, we have someone who's really thinking about innovation and thinking ahead to the next horizon of what do we need to start talking about today to continue elevating our data and analytics foundations.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Noelle. It's fascinating to me that if you combine the evolution of, you know, where we were with our data strategies, our cloud strategies, as well as generative AI, but then I spend a lot of time thinking about emerging tech that's not yet in like day to day. And so you think about, like, I was reading some stuff today about, like, you know, like computing on the edge and all these things that we have out there. And then how do we bring those into the day to day? So that's really interesting. James, how are you all thinking about this data foundation and data strategy in your organization?
maybe I'll just peel the onion a little bit on the strategy around GenAI, because I think the data strategy, has been going on for years, but now GenAI has come in. So if you think about it on the spectrum of sort of consumable AI, all the way down to sort of that build from scratch, I think your data needs are different depending on where you are or what you want to do and how you want to implement it. So if you think about your GenAI strategy, you don't necessarily, if you're going to use consumable AI, so let's take Bing Copilot or even Office 365 Copilot, there's far less worry about making sure you've got everything well structured and all of your data in the right place and a great data strategy, because it's just embedded or consumable within the application. But then as you work toward a very, very, custom build foundational model of your own, fine-tuned your own, you're doing your own prompt and data retrieval, you need a very, very robust data strategy. So I think it really depends on where you're at. So from Gore, we're actually on the end of the spectrum where we're looking to how do we consume and how do we embed sort of pre-tuned models that have already been tuned for specific tasks within perhaps one of our core applications or perhaps from one of our cloud providers, rather than the other end where you would need a very fulsome data infrastructure to support your own custom foundational model. So I think that would be the lens that I would bring to answer that question.
Yeah, Dave, how about you?
There's a lot that's been covered in the prior answer, so I'll take it a different angle and talk to how we're as a large insurco and FI that's been around for a lot of years, like many of my peers around the table here. We have a lot of legacy infrastructure, so we've got data products that we've been building out. We've got platform as a service capability, the analytics capabilities, and so on. Fantastic. But one of the areas that we're looking at is how do we leverage GenAI and AI in general to enhance and improve and accelerate what we've got, the transformation of what we have in our mainframe systems. And so what we've been doing, and a lot of times we deal with this thing, I've kind of pseudo coined this term, the endangered species, and meaning subject matter expertise that is, retiring quickly, whether they be mainframes or, as Noelle called out, like the knowledge bases that exist across our organizations are highly unstructured and frankly, really maybe disorganized in different areas, and a lot of effort going into those things. So, we are looking at shifting the strategy towards not just our traditional assets, but into these things to address the endangered species. So early wins on things like code conversion, documentation, some really interesting results in knowledge management search and that kind of thing. Frankly, putting structure to things that were highly unstructured and challenging to work with in the past. Think the vagaries of plan design in the various group businesses, and those kind of things are take a lot of energy to unlock.
Yeah, I like that, especially in with to your point, like with the retiring age of like so much was in people's minds. How can we leverage the learning while they're still here to kind of get that out of, I call it the Vulcan mind meld, but like, how do we get that out of people's minds so that the next generation who can be democratized in using these things doesn't have to have all that, because it's now in the mind of these things that we train. I love that. We're seeing that across, by the way, the other thing I find interesting about that is we're seeing that across the entire value chain of insurance. So it's not just at the carrier level, it's also at the agents, at the producers, at the distribution level, all the way through the entire value chain. So I think that's one aspect that's also bringing us together across ecosystem and across value chain. So with that, I want to get into our kind of last kind of main segment, which is our lovely partnership build, buy. It's all ours. It's our secret sauce. We can share it with you. No, we can't. This is a new world where I've never heard the word co-opetition more times in the last 6 months. I was like, is this word always existed? But we're talking about doing things in different ways. where not everything is our secret sauce. And I wanted to reflect back. We were having this conversation before the panel where I've always been just so impressed with the Canadian tech talent scene. I built a talent shop there, focused my technology team there, and it's just such an emerging area of top talent. Yet it's also been known in the industry that sometimes the US pushes the envelope a little bit more in like core digitization. And so I was thinking about the topic today about, you know, the blueprint for Canada, and you all have this amazing AI, data science, tech talent right there in Canada. How are you all leveraging that to your competitive advantage first? And secondarily, how does that affect your decision to build, buy, or partner, including your investment strategy as well as your IP, you know, like what's yours, what's other people's? And maybe, James, I'm going to start with you. I think your headset's working. Let's go.
So I think the important when I answer this question is our context. So Gore Mutual is one of the mid-sized P&C players. So we're very focused. So if the people listening, that how do you partner and where would we look to buy from? It's very much focusing on our partnerships within our own ecosystem. So we're trying to simplify our landscape. We're trying to simplify to our core platforms. We're trying to simplify to our core cloud providers and the services that they bring. And I think the value is really going to come from a small number of sort of specialized, for us at least, a small number of specialized models. So it's how can I work with, or we work with our existing partners and our existing ecosystem alongside others to bring that capability to the fore. So because we talked about it earlier, to get this capability to the employees, it has to be there. It has to be through an application. It has to be through some means of interacting with it. So when I'm trying to focus, or we're trying to focus very much on we're a Guidewire shop. So most of our transactions, most of the time, our employees are working in Guidewire. So how are we bringing those capabilities into that ecosystem or into our call center solution within Amazon? So I think it's a case of really focus the partnership element on our core applications and on our core cloud providers.
And the other thing, and I'm going to kick it to Noelle next because I want to hear Noelle's thought on this. The other thing I spend a lot of time focus on is like redundancy in terms of, and I used to say this back in the day when I was trying to decode handwriting manuscript, like, why would I do that when Microsoft does that? I'm just using that as an example. Like I focus a lot on redundancy and the best bang for my buck. And like, I'm not going to go head to head with some of the biggest tech giants in the world as an insurance carrier, but I am going to go head to head on something that's really bespoke and nuanced to insurance. And to your point, leveraging that. So Noelle, how are you thinking about this as it pertains to your role? And are there any nuances that you're considering in your partnership strategy?
Love what you just said there, because, that's the approach we're taking as well. Like when we think about partnerships, first and foremost, we want to keep it simple. So, as much as possible, if we can maximize the value we can get out of the current partnerships we have in our current ecosystem, let's do that. And if that means, really take more of that joint or co-creation approach and giving them early feedback around the future of their products, let's do that, right? So we're definitely taking that approach. An extension of that, when we think about competitive advantage, where we can really lean in and differentiate, what are those bespoke and nuanced opportunities or solutions? Some of the nuances we think about are, well, first, do we have the in-house capabilities to support the use case? Is this an opportunity to partner with some of our partners in the ecosystem to create this joint team and have that team do this, create this bespoke solution with skills that they have just picked up, because these are new. Some of these do require newer skills, newer techniques to be able to develop and design it well, right? We also have to think about, what's the tools and platforms that are being used, because there's a lot of thinking that's required to make this usable in that front-end experience. You're looking at a really broad base of users who need to be set up for success to adopt these tools, right? And then there's also the data question. And to the point around, do I want to compete with like the Microsofts or the Salesforces in the world to evolve this product? Like that's always a consideration. So as we design and develop these solutions and we think about the deployment of these at scale, what would an ongoing or a persistent squad look like in terms of ongoing support and enhancements and maintenance and the change management required there? Now, what's the priority in which we answer these questions? I think that's really nuanced. It really depends on the situation, but those are some of the key things that we are definitely thinking about.
Right. I love that. Dave, how are you all thinking about this? Any differences from what your colleagues?
Not any material differences from what my peers have talked about. I think maybe what I'll talk about, because we are really going all in with the ecosystem partners, as was called out and so on. What I will say is that we have worked with a number of smaller organizations, and one of the things that when we are looking at smaller organizations versus core platforms that we're leveraging, one of the things that we do right at the outset is make sure that we're aligning on values, like what's everybody bringing to the table, and what do we want to control versus do we need to control, and having an open discussion about that, and getting into the weeds around like what's critical versus nice to have from a value prop, making sure that we've got alignment around that, and frankly, as an organization of our size, we're going to want to influence the technical roadmap that any organization, and frankly, some of the security practices and so on. We are a regulated industry, and we've got, whether we're talking about data privacy, whether we're talking about info security or whatever, those kind of things are critically important to us, and frankly, our gating mechanisms that we use, and if we can find alignment around those core requirements, then we're unable to partner. So that sometimes can be a limiting factor.
Yeah, I really think that's so important, because to your point, the cycles of security and I'm going to ask you just as a quick follow-up before we get to Fahad. Because procurement used to report to me, so I was very familiar with the security reviews, and everybody loved me. But one of the things that we weren't great about was cycling back through. Like, once you were procured as a vendor, you were procured as a vendor until it came up for the some sort of cyclical review on whatever. How are you triggering these? Like, if you're partnering with existing vendors and you've got these new things that you're leveraging, these new capabilities that you're leveraging, are you doing a new like mini, we don't even have to go so far as to say procurement review, but how are you thinking about that in terms of data security, their own AI practices, ethics, sustainability, like all the things that we have to subscribe to as corporate citizens?
Yeah. So all of that, it's it is something that kind of universally, anything new, because the landscape has changed so much over the past 7-10 years, and some of the agreements that we may have in place with some of these providers that go back of a long time. So right. Anything new, we're opening up that box, and it can be sometimes a bit of a sticky, messy situation, but it is worthwhile, for like mutually beneficial for us to do so. And so what I always say with my internal teams right now is, expect to spend a little bit more time running through that gauntlet of the controls, because it's necessary that we do that.
Yeah, and side note, talk about something that we could apply generative AI to, right? Because it's like there's so much changing.
Actually, I just met with one of the leads of our analytics teams in one of our businesses, and they had just leveraged GenAI to take a look at the MSAs for all of our contracts to identify sticky language and those kind of things. So yeah, very cool use case, rapid turnaround, about a couple of weeks of work, and saved, hundreds of hours of pouring through with magnifying glass. So
I love that. Fahad, over to you. I would love to hear some unique perspectives. There's a lot in this one. Build and buy is a complex strategy.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'd say is maybe perhaps there is a need to differentiate build, buy, and partner. I think Noelle touched upon that one as well. And yes, we need to look at whether the capabilities exist within the organization to build that. But what I would add another dimension to that, which is whether so it's going to be use case dependent, and also whether that use case is actually going to be a differentiating factor, right? So it's almost like, when the value differentiation we're targeting is extremely high and the capabilities that exist are also high, then yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to build, right? So as if the capabilities are low and the value differentiation is high, I'd say it might make sense to even partner, right, alongside in an organization, right? Whereas, I mean, if you're looking at just a commodity type service, then buying something off the shelf, I think makes a lot of sense. And in terms of like the core systems and the core platforms, right? I mean, Aviva is taking we're trying to take like an agnostic approach, right? So we're looking at this landscape is evolving so quickly. It's so again, I think the strategy should be agnostic, right? So what the big tech companies are trying to one up each other every month.
Exactly.
And so you should be looking at what Google is doing, what Microsoft is doing, what directly OpenAI is doing, and what Meta is doing in the open source world. So trying to take like a model agnostic approach as well, right? So that's kind of like the high level approach that Aviva is taking.
I think what you're bringing up is fascinating because, like, I remember we all talked about like going to the cloud, right? And I remember I was like one of the first people that had to get outside counsel involved because at the time nobody internally had reviewed a 3-year SaaS contract, and I was entering into a 3-year commitment to go to the cloud, and like it was like all those things. But of course we've evolved where different cloud partners, hybrid, all these things are very common now. But you bring up a fascinating point, and I've been beating the drum on this recently, which is I want to be agnostic in everything I do because it's a bit of an arms race. And as a company, you don't know who's going to have the best, and what's best today, 3 to 6 months from now, may not be the best. And Dave, I heard you say it with everything new and these long-term agreements that we used to enter into. And so I think it's really fascinating that almost the strategy that creates objectivity and agnosticity within, which I know we've all been setting up our layers to be able to do that anyway. If you have those abstraction layers, I think you're going to be able to win in this because you can specific, like fit for purpose, connect to one thing for one purpose or not. Are you all seeing that as a trend in terms of agnosticity?
Yeah.
And maybe Fahad, I'll back to you on that.
Yeah, certainly. So I mean, the approach that as I mentioned, we're taking a model agnostic approach, right? So we're giving the teams frameworks to pick the right model, right? And what's the best way to pick the right LLM for a particular use case? That's the kind of footprint we're providing our internal teams in terms of agnosticity. And as I mentioned, we're looking at talking to OpenAI directly. We're looking at GCP. We're looking at Microsoft. So yeah, that's exactly what you just described. The agnosticity is the strategy for us.
Okay.
The only counterpoint, well, the only counterpoint for me would be that there's an element of what's your risk tolerance and how quickly do you want to get the benefits. So we can wait and wait and wait and make sure that our architecture is perfect, that we've got full agnostic and we can plug and play, or you go and you gain the benefits, and maybe you made a bad call and maybe there's some tech that you got to unwind later, but you've got the benefit. So I think there's an element of what's your risk tolerance when you think about that. I mean, I don't disagree with the perspective, but I think there's other things to bring into that decision.
And a practical reality about the amount of investment that we've got to put into things, right? And so, we have a very public, relationship with, our cloud provider, and we put a lot of energy into that, but we are engineering things that in a way that gives us the ability to be modular and plug and play. but I'm a big believer in get busy doing, get busy showing value, and you know, not do too much prognosticating or, you know, fighting over like, you know, which tool is the best. Let's get value out of this and let's evaluate it as we go, but not to spend too much cycles on that. Let's show and prove value out of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, Noelle, I'm going to ask you a quick question here as we start to get towards the 6-minute mark. How are you handling data privacy concerns with using generative AI within your day-to-day operations? And do you believe that generative AI is increasing the risk of any of your data risk positions?
So, you know, one of the things that I think we can all say we do well, because we're all in this sector, in this is we do risk very well. That is a strength that we've leaned into here in Manulife. So, you know, the way we've looked at it is the data privacy and security risks posed by GenAI is not a net new risk. If you take a step back in the overall landscape of what are the risks we need to make sure we solve for in the use of AI broadly and in the existence of AI broadly. What it does do is introduces a new way of looking at risk. So to my panel's point about revisiting our policies, revisiting the processes, the frameworks we have in place, that is an exercise that we are doing as well. So more pointedly to the question, does it increase the risk? Not necessarily. It might just be like a different way of tackling risks now that there's a more unique lens that we're taking to how this risk might be presented in GenAI.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to take another one that just came in, and I don't know who wants to answer this one, but we haven't really talked a lot about startups as part of the ecosystems. We've talked about partners, which maybe could be implied in there. But could any of you share how or if you're interacting with Canadian AI startups? And maybe, I don't know, James or anybody have a thought on this one?
So the comments that I was making about like working with smaller organizations was I didn't use the word startup, but that's who I was directing that kind of you know, verbiage towards. And so we have, you know, partnered up with, you know, groups with domain specific expertise, whether it be in the health space or, you know, in the claim space, et cetera, where they're bringing something to the table, AI being a core part of that value offering. And so that's, I just wanted to be clear that the commentary I had before about that was targeting startups.
Right. Well, so as we near the last couple of minutes, I want to give each of the panelists, I love giving everybody a call to action moment where you can wind it down and say, if you could ask anybody to start, stop, or continue doing one thing, you're like, you know, you got all these hundreds of guests listening in today. They heard it here. What would you want them to do? And James, I'm going to start with you.
So just broadly on this topic, it's huge. It's coming. Start thinking about it in terms of capabilities and think about where it can be used in your organization. I think so. If you haven't already, you need to start a strategy on this. Would be where my recommendation.
Start. Just do it. Swoosh.
Just
Noelle,
get going.
It's the same way. And what I would add to what James said around starting, start with a mindset of value. You know, let's not talk about the capability. Let's actually talk about the value and then insert the question of capability. And when you start, you have to have a very cross-functional team at the table. You want business, you want data, you want AI, you want a lot of other like risk, legal, and compliance. We've actually brought them to the table as well in early conversation. So I would say start, anchor on value, and be very clear about what is it that we need to learn so that we can pivot, and what would potential pivot points look like. Awesome. Fahad?
Yeah, I mean, same theme as say start, and even if that means starting small, right? So you know, if I were to break down, you know, outward-facing GenAI application and inward-facing employee application, I think there's a ton of value to be had in inward-facing, you know, employee productivity tools that are off the shelves, like I think the code development tool, software engineering, and we are seeing a ton of efficiency that can be had, and I think software engineering as a whole is gonna transform as a result of that. So just looking inwards, I think, we can create a ton of value.
I appreciate that. Dave?
I'll take a very individual kind of perspective. Start, learn by doing. Leverage GenAI as an intern to make you better, faster, more productive in your day-to-day. Right? Beyond the big transformational things, be a cyborg. How can you leverage this in your work every day? It's a game changer.
Well, very much appreciate it. First of all, thank you to our amazing panelists. Thank you to our audience for all of your engaging questions today. Really enjoyed going through, seeing the blueprint for AI innovation in Canadian insurance. And for those of you tuning in, please join us at FOI Canada. This is a series leading up to our in-person event, which will be December 12th and 13th in Toronto. Thank you and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you.